One of the main reasons I managed to step out of the day-to-day work of running Swing Step is because of the lessons I learned from this book, The E-Myth Revised by Michael E. Gerber. In it, he introduces this powerful concept of working on your business rather than in your business. And basically, every time you do a certain task, while you do that task, you're also going to think about what systems do I have to put in place? What instructions do I have to put in place in order for somebody else to be able to come in and do the same work at the same quality as I'm doing? And the outcome of these lessons actually played out exactly how I expected it to do for Swing Step when it comes to the ability for me to step out of the day-to-day work and focus in the areas where I'm strongest. However, from implementing this concept for over 15 years, I got a chance to also see the long-term impact of some of the decisions I made as I was working on building those systems. And in this video, I want to share with you what I call the dark side of building systems and what I will be doing differently with the startup MergeLabs.io. So if you keep watching, you learn how to think about the trade-offs between curiosity and consistency. You learn about what happens to the systems when the builders move on and the impact your onboarding and initial employee training will have on the long-term perspective of the system, and the 3 things I would do differently when I build my systems and developing the teams. So let's start by talking about that trade-off between curiosity and consistency. For context, my professional why has been about creating enriched environments for people. This has sort of been the red thread across my entire professional life, where I want to create experiences for humans that are highly engaging, highly stimulating, and when they leave these events, they're just recharged. I talk about this a lot, so I'm just going to leave that at that here. So as part of this motivation, SwingStep was created on the premise of spreading more enriched environments through the vehicle of dance, Lindy Hop in our specific case. And our strategy was basically around how can we make it more accessible? How can we reduce the hurdles that would prevent people to have amazing experiences? So as part of the tactics that we used in order to achieve this strategy was that we hired our team as full-time employees so that everybody had the time needed to figure out different ways of reducing the hurdle of experiencing these dances. So it was about training, about delivery of content, is about how can we make the experiences in class and in festivals better and better and better. But I'm bringing this up within the context of the dark side of building systems. So something must have gone wrong, right? Well, yes and no. From the perspective that was promised in the book, that I will be able to take myself out of the day-to-day business, things are just working smoothly because people know what to do, all of that happened. In fact, one of the most important things was that we could take a service like teaching a class and make it such that we can train a novice teacher within just a few months, deliver a class that promises a certain outcome. The ability to communicate the complex elements of dance in simple and accessible ways, the ability for us to do this in different cities and create more or less the same results, all of those things happen. So in terms of the goal of making the dance more accessible, being able to do something that is possible to spread across multiple cities, we were actually achieving exactly that goal. I could step out of the day-to-day work and focus my energy on areas I could contribute best to. And in fact, today, the fact that I can have time to create these videos focusing on my startup is all thanks to us having built so many systems. But more importantly, this is a service-oriented business. So in order for us to reach our goals of reducing the hurdles for many people to experience enriched environments, one of the bottlenecks was our ability to have teachers quickly learn the skills needed to deliver a certain quality of experience. And we were also really successful with that. A novice teacher with only a few months of training could deliver really high impact classes, and that in different cities. So from that perspective, we actually achieved everything we set to achieve within the context of the goal of making the dance more accessible to more people, so more people could have enriched environments. Now, because I got to see these systems over the length of 15 years, I got to see the good and the bad and the ugly of the long-term impacts of those. For example, one of the things I would have wished for that we did differently is to create an environment where especially our novice teachers would engage more with self-directed learning and develop their own curiosity towards the dance and build a direct relationship with the dance and the art form, rather than building that relationship through our system. Now, this is something we created out of the conditions of like We wanted to achieve a certain outcome, and this was the fastest way of achieving this outcome, but we left other skills off the table that is no longer something I'm willing to make as a trade-off. And this is going to be something I'm going to go a little bit deeper in further down in the video. But for now, just know that the way you introduce your systems, the way you're thinking about how people go through these experiences has long-term consequences that we want to think about and design as part of our strategy of introducing them to these systems. If you want to figure out if you're on the right side of that curiosity versus consistency trade-off, you might want to ask yourself if you're happy or unhappy with the amount of instructions somebody's asking you in your team. If you feel like you need to give them the detailed recipe with all the different nuances in order for them to feel confident and comfortable executing, you might have gone too far in system buildings on at least building systems that promotes that sort of behavior versus building systems that encourage people to take more initiative or having that desire to building mastery on their art form. And this is sort of people who really strive for mastery in their craft are really enjoyable to work with, right? So is your infrastructure and systems promoting that sort of self-actualization, or is it dampening that desire and creating people who just want to follow procedures? And another way of noticing is like firefighting is happening and people are getting good at sort of resolving the fires, but nobody take a step back and see what happens upstream that this fire still is happening and taking initiatives to resolve the upstream issues in order for the firefighting not be needed in the first place. So if you're the only one who does the upstream work, or very few people are doing the upstream work, part of the reason is because then most people are getting stuck at working in the systems and haven't developed the skills that are needed to working on the business. So the next question is, what happens when the builders move on? For this, we want to have a clear picture of how systems are built. You're going through 4 steps. It starts with the learning phase where somebody has to learn what it is we want to do and do the work enough times so we can step out and say, okay, this is a good solution. I want to build a system around this. And then they start building that system. But before we call it finished, what we want to do is to have somebody else go through the process and see if they can achieve the same results as you did while you were working on it. Because there's a lot of tacit knowledge that is hard to put into your systems that you got from the whole process of learning and iterating and trying and knowing exactly which part of those things went in there. It's hard to know ahead of time until you see a few people who have tried to go through your system and achieve a certain kind of outcome. And once you've gone through in that whole loop a few times, then you can say, okay, I have built a system here. And then you just take that whole thing on repeat. You learn, you build a system, you see what happens when the other people are trying to use the system and make improvements from there. And then you go on from each task of your business one by one and try to implement the systems. So as part of this process, there's a pattern that emerges. And this pattern is that you or whomever it is that is building these systems become better and better at building systems. It's a skill they are developing. At the same time, the people who are using the systems, they're getting better and better in using the system. But it also means the people who are building the systems becomes worse and worse in working in the systems, and people who are working in the systems becomes more and more dependent on those systems. So it polarizes your team into people who can build the systems and people who can follow the systems. So the consequence of all of this is that your system builders start to move further and further away from the core of the business and loses touch with how things are working within that part of the business. And as your business grows, the environments start to change, but the systems don't. So the ability to make meaningful improvements at the core stagnates as you're not involved. And your team's ability to make the needed changes is not developed. So the whole system as a whole stagnates. And over time, the thing that was a reason for you to be able to step back and have other people achieve a certain results become the same reason where your business stop making progress or even crumble under its own systems because everything else has changed, but those haven't. And people don't feel responsible for changing them anymore because somebody with authority established them in the first place. So what you want to pay attention to is that your systems are built in such a way that there is a natural continuous development built into the whole system, and that people who go through these processes, learn to do improvements on those systems as well. So you develop system thinkers as part of the whole process. And this is something I really want to double click on, because there's one thing that I've learned in this 15 years of running SwingStep that comes maybe from the nature of the business we've done, that I think is super powerful for anybody who's building an organization, working with a team, needs to be aware of. This insight comes from the fact that SwingStep at its core is a teaching company for adults. And for an adult to learn, they need to want to learn something over a prolonged period of time. Meaning, as a consequence for your organization, you want your employees or your team members, everybody who is involved, want to develop in the same direction over a prolonged period of times. All vectors need to be aligned. And if you find yourself in a situation where somebody wants to develop in that direction, another person in that direction, and the vectors start to diverge, then you create massive amount of friction in the organization. And that can be the whole reason why the organization crumbles in the first place. So you need to set the whole process up in such a way that when people come there and start developing this understanding of what they want to do in the organization, how they want to grow, that wish and that tendency is aligned with you over the long term. Now, here's something really exciting we discovered when it comes to working with adults over a longer period of time. And that is that the first couple of months of adults coming and engaging with your organization, they're quite open-minded into what it takes to succeed within that organization. That means there's a bunch of agreements, some conscious, many of them unconscious, that are made in that process that is formed based on the experience they had. And we're talking about the early days. We're talking about the first 2 to 3 months. Within these period, their mind is open. A lot of information goes in there, but then they have to close that mindset. Why? Because being open-minded is actually quite stressful. You're not operating at your best. So you do want people to sort of form this agreement and then close it in order for them to be able to focus on just fulfilling that agreement, improving the skills that are needed to fulfill those agreements, right? So it's actually a process you want them to experience. But we only have those 2 to 3 months. We don't have a long-term period. If, for example, development, or when a fire happens, look upstream and see what is the core reason for that fire that happened and solve that as part. If those sort of behaviors and skills are not included in those early months, then it will not be part of the agreement. So when you expect that later, you're going against what has been established as part of the agreement, and you get pushback, you get conflicts, and you're just not going to get the same cooperation. So, for example, when we have this mindset that first learn the systems, first understand why we build things in one way, and then later, once you have learned this, maybe a year or 2 years later, then you can start putting in your own thoughts and ideas around it and problem solving, so to say. But if this is the way we go about it, then not only the first 3 months, but for the first year, you have one type of experience. The agreement is that now. You won't get that other thing. So when you think it should be enough to leave a few instructions and they will be autonomous and understand what to do, understand how to firefight and stuff like that, this has not been part of the agreement. People will insist that for them to do a good job, you need to provide the same quality of instructions as you did during the time where they were open-minded about the instructions. So designing for the early experience of an employee or a team member needs to be based on the mindset you're forming, so that that is becoming the long-term alignment that you have with your team member, rather than quickly learn a certain sets of skills. So knowing all of this now, and as I've been experiencing the long-term consequences of system buildings, here are the 3 things I would do differently moving forward. Now, the first thing I would do is to pay strong attention to the different team members that are joining the organization from the perspective of their tendency towards system building versus system using or following, right? And you want people across the whole spectrum at different stages of your organization. There are some people who thrive in this chaotic environment where there are no systems and you're the one who's going to figure things out and build them. I'm one of those kind of people, but I'm also not so good at working in the business and doing the day-to-day stuff. Is just not where I'm strongest. But you have a lot of people who thrive exactly in that environment. When there is strong systems in place, they operate like crazy. They make sure your back is free so you can continue doing the system building. And you really need both in order to thrive. And you want to encourage both of those things to happen. but they're different people. Now, this is a spectrum, meaning there are also people across the spectrum, some people in the middle, some people for the right and left. Now, as a early stage startup, for example, you want to try to find people more on the system building because that's just what's needed at this stage of the business. But at some point, you need to introduce more and more of people who are just comfortable working within those systems to keep your back free, to explore and develop more stuff while they are doing the day-to-day stuff. However, as organization grows, you're going to be in the fringes. Within each department, you need people who are comfortable and happy to work in the business, but at the same time, they also want to work on the business. Occasionally, they take a step out, try to figure out, oh, this fire is happening all the time. How can I go and fix the upstream thing? Okay, once that's solved, they go back and work in the business. So you need those people in the middle as well. And recognizing early on what kind of personality you have, you provide them and your organization a better chance to be successful by helping people working according to their strengths. But if your system is tilted towards, for example, everybody should first follow the systems, you filter and develop these people, and all of the ones in the middle and to the right who's doing the system buildings, those are not attracted, those are not developed, and so on, and vice versa. So it's a spectrum. Pay attention to where they are. As part of the strategy, at least for me, the way I will go forward is that I will build tools that allow my team to be stronger and more efficient in what they do, and teach them how to handle those tools at mastery level so that they can just become better and better at their craft. And I want to try to avoid as much of processes that guarantees a certain outcome, where say this, you achieve that, say that, you achieve this. So instead of this, I want to make sure that the ongoing development is a process of self-actualization that comes from the perspective of them becoming masters of their tools. And as part of the onboarding process, I want to make sure it's designed for mindset rather than skill. This idea that first learn the things we've done the way we've done it, so you understand why they are there, so you understand when you tweak something here, what happens there, which is actually really important. But that means if that's going to happen for too long of a time, their mindset is actually set for system following or system working in the business, not on the business. So I want to make sure the early experience is more designed in such a way that I can create controlled experiences that provides the whole mindset, right? Learn this thing, problem solve this thing, go upstream and figure out how you can make it better and build a system. And in that process, I also get to see where do people thrive the best. Are they on the builder side? Are they on the working in the business side? I get to know the whole spectrum a little bit better. I get to put in a mindset that works long-term for me. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I really love geeking out on this topic. So I will make a few more videos in the series of building systems. But if there's anything specific you want me to go through, of course, put that in the comment section, and I'm happy to include that in the next video. And if you want to just talk about your own situation, reach out, we can have a conversation. But until the next time, subscribe, like, comment, all the good social media stuff. Thank you for watching.